Good morning, everybody. My name is Nina Unitas, and I have the very great pleasure and honor of introducing to you a dear friend and colleague of mine. I promise to make this brief because I look up to her greatly, as I'm sure most of you do, for the impact she has made on art education. So 50 years in education, 50 years being an artist, a teacher, a learner, a researcher, a leader, and an advocate. That's an incredible statistic. Just yesterday we were sitting and chatting, and I talked about 10 years goes by in the blink of an eye, and she said, try 50, Nina, and I thought, geez Louise, 50 years. It's just remarkable. 1/2 of a century of service and dedication to art education while making an incredible impact. In 2003, I had the pleasure of being part of the first AEC Leadership Academy. This is when I began learning about and experiencing the amazing work coming out of the AEC under Sarah's leadership. Experiencing high-quality professional learning geared towards arts educators as individuals, making that impact we need in our profession was astounding to me. Sarah continues her work in our region by focusing on the vision of the AEC, a transformed education system infused with imagination and creativity catalyzed by the arts. As a principal who has been advocating to do just that in one single school, I'm incredibly grateful to Sarah for empowering our region to embrace the power of art. By illustrating a steadfast commitment on excellence and meaningful, high-quality learning experience, not only for students, teachers, but also administrators, Sarah has raised the bar for all other organizations in our region. Quantifying the impact on art education that Sarah continues to make is an impossible task. So I settled with the fact that her impact is infinite. It's a great honor for me to introduce to you Sarah Tambucci, an artist, a teacher, a learner, a researcher, a leader, and an advocate, a woman who will continue to inspire others to collaborate, learn, and grow.
Good morning, everyone. I want to begin by thanking you all for getting up early and being here today. That alone is an honor. The Board of Directors of the Pennsylvania Art Education Association has given me this wonderful opportunity to address you as a legacy. That's real hard for me to understand. I had to look the word up in the dictionary. I thought that was a good place to start. And I'm not sure about a legacy, but I can tell you a few stories this morning that will help you to see the role you have played in my life and in my career, I hope. And I brought a few things with me, a few artifacts. To help me tell the story. You're going to hear reoccurring themes in what I have to say this morning. You will hear faith, you will hear family, and you will also hear friends. And I consider all of you in this room friends. You chose to be here this morning. You chose to dedicate your professional life to something I believe in. So you're all friends. So the first artifact I have to share with you is something about my faith. Without it, I wouldn't be here. My first Holy Communion prayer book and my very first rosary. The first artifacts. You know, it was kind of hard for me as a child to figure out what I was going to do, just like you. But I think at that time, girls had basically 3 choices, as I was reminded in one of my sessions. Be a teacher, be a nurse, or be a secretary if you had half a brain. Those were the old days. I'm not angry about it or bitter. I think I did what I did because of that. It was very, very important to me to go to college. Well, my mother, who was one of 17 children, didn't necessarily believe that having a college education for a girl was important. My sister was always her model. She was the one who dated her first boyfriend and married him. But I wanted to do something different. In fact, she got tired of the boyfriends after a short time, and she started to worry whether I would ever get married. I found some other artifacts. I did get to college. Now, how many of you can say that you still have your student handbook from your freshman year in college? I keep it around as a reminder. I go back and read it, and I can't believe what it says. We really needed to be told this stuff. College was hard for me. I had to study very, very hard. But there was one particular class I want to tell you about, and then one experience. The class I want to tell you about was my speech class. I got up to give my very first speech as a freshman, and I panicked. My hands got sweaty, I drained white, and the professor simply said, "Sarah, you may be seated." And I thought that was the shortest career I've ever seen in education. I tried to sneak out the door when the class was over, and it didn't work. She called me up to the desk and she said, "Sarah, how badly do you want to be a teacher?" And I said, "Very badly." And she said, "Then you're going to have to get over your fear of getting in front of a group of people and talking." Isn't it ironic that I'm giving a talk today? I wanted you to appreciate where I was. Yes, I was going to be a teacher. And the next artifact for you is my student teaching manual. Now, technology played a critical role in this because as a student teacher, we had to have triplicate copies of our lesson plans, one on the desk, one for me, and one for the cooperating teacher. And I see bobbing heads in the room. You're reflecting with me, right? I'm not telling any lies, except it was harder then because we had to do it on a typewriter. And usually I did it on onion skin because it was easier to erase. How many of you even know what onion skin is? Oh, there you go. I'm among friends. So my student teaching manual. Along about now, my niece is thinking, "So you saved all that stuff for a reason." She's helping me clean out my house because she figures that she'll do it now instead of when I die, and I can get to help her do it now. Okay, so time goes on. I almost didn't get out of college. And for those of you who are younger in the profession here, this is a story of persistence. It was my jewelry class, and last semester of my senior year. And we had to have X number of pieces and do X number of final pieces for the show at the end of the course. And my pieces were all started, but they weren't finished. One had to be buffed. Another stone, I had to use the lapidary, and I couldn't get access to it. Because in those days, girls had to be in the dorm at 9:30. Boys were allowed to be in the studios, but girls had to be in at 9:30. I was having trouble getting my jewelry done. So I went to my sorority sisters. And my sorority sisters were all out student teaching, as I had been. And I got access to someone's art room. And all of my sorority sisters, there were 7 of them, we went into the jewelry studio in this high school. It was Harbor Creek High School, I can tell you. And they each took a piece and finished it. Now, is that cheating? I don't know. I never did reconcile that one with me. But on campus, I was cautioned by my supervising teacher who was observing me when I had student taught. And he said, "You know, Sarah, I just heard you might not graduate." He said, "You've got to do something about that." And that was my precipitating event to get my sorority sisters to help me. So I came very, very close to not graduating at that time. Well, time marches on, and I loved being a teacher. Absolutely loved it. And here's where PAEA starts. One of the things I learned early on, that to become a professional was a small thing. to remain a professional was much harder. And I had to have easy access to the latest, the greatest, the most important information. And I also needed access to friends, colleagues, because I found my situation in 3 elementary schools extremely isolating. I found those things with PAEA. Now, I need to tell you, at that time that I joined PAEA, there were 2 members of PAEA from the Pittsburgh area. I have no idea how many there are now, but there were 2. I will mention her name, Dr. Barbara Fredette and Sarah Tambucci at that time. And Barbara was on the board of PAEA. And they were trying to decide whether they were just going to give it up because it wasn't succeeding. And she asked me to serve on the board. I wanted to remain up to date. I knew Barbara was the key to that. She had been my advisor at University of Pittsburgh when I got my master's degree. So Barbara and I would start getting on an airplane and travel to Harrisburg because it was cheaper than buying gas. There's lots of stories in here. It was cheaper than buying gas. We could go fly to Harrisburg, come back again. Remember, no security. So you literally walked onto the plane, walked and did your thing, got back on the plane and came home. And we did that for every PAEA meeting. Soon it became apparent that if PAEA was going to exist, we had to do something about increasing membership. We wanted engagement. And we made 2 decisions that I think affected the life of PAEA all the way back to that time. One was to develop a new constitution. Others, not me, had done that. They had done the hard work of doing that. But the other thing I think I did play a role in, we started to look at how are those music educators so successful? Let's go steal. But I always steal from the best. They had it figured out. They had broken up the state into regions. And each of those regions, they would have activities happen. Sound familiar? Okay, that's what was going on. And we started to do that. And we started to engage people at the local level who didn't want to travel across state, couldn't travel across state, had family commitments that made it impossible for them to travel across state. The next thing we did was standardize the state conference. For many, many, many years, we said teachers can't get out of school. They have to let their administrators know so far in advance what they're going to do. And we don't have a date yet. We don't have a place yet. So we did some really important things. We standardized the location. It was going to be in Harrisburg, center of the state. And we also standardized the date, the weekend before Halloween. And for many, many years, we did not deviate from that template until we all got kind of tired about what was going on around Harrisburg. And we thought maybe we should go see Philly or Pittsburgh or some other place. Yes? Okay, so we started to do that. But by then, we had increased the membership. Artifact. You see, Pennsylvania was doing some pretty amazing things. I don't know if anyone in the room remembers this, but this is the Keystone Integrated Framework. Anyone remember this or looks? Okay, some people do. Marcy, I see you shaking your head. Pennsylvania was leading the pack across the country. I don't know if you realize that. Things that were coming out of Pennsylvania, and part of the reason was in Harrisburg, we have Dave Dietz down there right now. In Harrisburg, we had 7 people in that position. Art, music, dance, theater, 2 in art. Art, music, dance, theater, 2 in art, and 2 in music, who were helping people across the state with information, current practices. It was marvelous. And we were able to do all kinds of things. PAEA was growing. And started to do a journal. This is an issue of the very first journal from PAEA. Anyone remember the journal? Yeah? Okay. And so we started to do a journal that people all over the country started to do journals in their states. Remember, this is pre-internet. Information was hard to come by. We had to have substantive documents. In fact, I understand the board is on the phone quite often. There was no such thing as a conference call. We didn't have conference calls. We had to take our bodies to where we wanted to have conversation. Well, some interesting things started to happen across the country. Lonnie Duke at the Getty had this idea with a number of people and some very important money that came by way of Getty to do something called discipline-based arts education. And some of you, again, Meg, you're shaking your head. Discipline-based arts education. That was going on at the same time. It gives you a time frame of what was happening. And now the country's on fire. We're starting to think differently about our practice. Our children and our young people do not have to do it. Take it, make it, take it. Make it, take it. No longer was that going to be good enough. Now, we were going to engage minds, not just hands. And we were going to talk about things like aesthetics, which, by the way, none of us had been trained in. We were going to talk about critical response, which, by the way, none of us had been trained in. So it was a very challenging time, but it was an exciting time. And I was very fortunate because by then I had ascended the ranks of PAEA and was starting to get some attention on my own on your behalf. I started to get invited to things like the Getty meetings and presentations and conferences. Came back here to Pennsylvania each time, and it enriched our learning. Many of us were involved in that and brought those ideas back to Pittsburgh, ideas back to Philly, across the state conference, and it was a very, very exciting time. And then something really exciting happened. Because I had served as president of the Pennsylvania Art Education Association, I was on the governing body of the National Art Education Association. And in that room, I got to meet presidents from all over the country. I was never going to be the same again. Now, I was no longer parochial. I was no longer just a kid who was a good art teacher in Pittsburgh area. Now I was speaking as your president and carrying a message that included people from Wilkes-Barre and Erie and Williamsport and Philly and Pittsburgh. It was my first responsibility to think more broadly about the work that we do. And because I was your president and because I was in that governing body, I got to know a lot of people. So when I was asked to be president, run for president, or president-elect of the Eastern region, I thought, this is kind of cool. I'm going from my classroom to the state organization, serving on this national committee of governors. This is pretty cool. It was addictive. Why? Because you could see it making a difference in people's lives. Every time I went back home to my kids, I taught for 23 years. Every time I went back to my classroom, my children were the beneficiaries of all of the stuff that I was doing all over the United States at that time. So I was achieving the goal of staying current, continue to learn, and take it back for my kids. That was my motivation. My passion was arts education. My passion was children and youth. I wanted them to have what I had. I wanted them to look at a work of art in wonder. I wanted them to understand that they had a capacity, and that capacity had to be developed for every single child, not just the ones who were talented. And my rationale and passion around that has never gone away. It's for every child. When I hear stories about special needs students being kept from an art class or special needs students being dumped in an art class, there are variations on a theme, right? It makes my blood boil because we're doing some of the things we're doing for the wrong reasons. They might even be the right things, but we're doing them for the wrong reasons. When I was president in Eastern Region, this amazing thing happened. I all of a sudden found out that the Eastern Region also included all of the schools in the world. The vice president of the Eastern region of NAEA represents all of the Department of Defense schools abroad. And now I started to get invitations abroad. It was fun, it was interesting and exciting, but guess what? I met more people. And those people continue to enrich my life. And because I knew more people knew who I was, I got elected as president-elect of NAEA. You honored me. This is the issue where I just was elected, and PAEA did this for me. Not just this issue, but you took me to an important place in the country, the United States of America, where arts education was happening, and I was a part of it because of you. And then some really amazing things started to happen. Remember that power thing I told you about? Now it was in my hand. And I'm not power hungry, although my brother might say that's not true. He's here today. But it was frightening and exciting at the same time. I would go home and I would wonder, I have to do this talk tomorrow and I don't know if I can do it. And then I'd do it. And some people would say, you're doing the right thing. You're not compromising. You're not setting yourself up for failure. You're setting us up for success. And it meant so much to me. So, my nameplate, President-elect. With that responsibility came a lot of soul searching. Like the time we were having a convention in Chicago, and I was approached, someone had set up, we were going to go to Hugh Hefner's place. And the reason we were going there is because Hugh Hefner has an amazing art collection, or had, I'm sorry, he's not with us any longer. And the Women's Caucus got to me. Now I'm president, and I'm sitting as president. And the Women's Caucus got to me and said, Sarah, you can't go to that reception. I had a dilemma. Do I justify? Do I honor? What happens? My faith kicked in again. And that night, I did a lot of soul searching. And I knew what I was going to do the next morning. My phone rang, and someone said, Sarah, remember, you need to be someplace in Chicago at 7 o'clock. Guess what time the reception was at Hugh Hefner's estate? 7 o'clock. All of a sudden, I couldn't go. So the dilemma was not a dilemma. I didn't even have to make a decision. That door opened all kinds of exciting experiences for me. I brought this artifact to remind me that I was invited to the Clinton White House. And now the game is really changing. Now the game is all about you're not you anymore. You are representing art educators from all over the United States. An invitation to the White House. By then, I was a principal in my school. Oh, that's a quick story too. It was put up or shut up time. I had been a teacher for 23 years at all levels and loved it. And the superintendent came to me one day and he said, I understand you have your supervisory credentials. I said, well, I do. And he said, we're going to reorganize the school district. We're going to shut down 6 elementary schools, build a brand new K-1-2 building, renovate the middle school into a 3-4-5 building, and I want you to be one of the principals. And I said, thank you, but no thank you. That fast. And now it's put up or shut up time. Sarah, you know all that art stuff you keep talking about? I'm giving you a chance to try it out in your own school. That's when I became a principal. I remember going home that night and discussing it with my wonderful husband, Art. That's not the best part. The best part's coming. And told him that I thought I wanted to try it. You know, how can I advocate all over the country for arts education and say this is what should be happening in schools? And I think I know what should be happening in schools, and not take up the gauntlet of being a principal in a school and figuring out if it really can work. The gig was up. I became a principal. And in the first year, I was able to have not one, but 2 courses for third graders. I had 12 sections of third grade. 12. We didn't have enough room on the stage for all the kids who wanted to sing, so we had 2 courses. We had 2 art teachers, right, Diane? 2 art teachers, not 1. We not only had 2 art teachers, but the physical education teachers had their feet put to the fire, because in Pennsylvania we have no certification for dance, and I knew that physical education teachers were the ones who were certified to teach dance because we didn't have that certification, and started to look for physical education teachers who would teach our kids creative movement. The gig was up. Yes, it can happen in a school, and it only gave me a little more fuel. I went on to become the first female president of the National Art Education Association at this time. You know, being first at anything is really tricky, because if you only have one, you have nothing to compare it to. I was the first female president in Pennsylvania. When you're first one, everybody's watching very carefully. So if people don't think a woman can do the job, and you get to do the job, and you don't do the job, what do they think? Women can't do the job. We're still suffering from that somewhat, aren't we? Interesting. Artifact. Anyone recognize this? Yeah. Now do you recognize it? Okay. From one of the conferences. My time as president didn't mean I forgot about PAEA, but I couldn't be as active in PAEA as I did my duties as president of NAEA. Always coming back. That's what this reminds me of, always coming back. And you have never let me down. You have honored me in so many ways, substantive ways. Artifact. Now technology is kicking in. In fact, it was such a big deal that it was on the front of the PAEA newsletter. You see, in 50 years, a lot of things happen. A lot of things have happened. Technology has made things amazing, amazingly good, and in my opinion, amazingly bad. I still do my best work when I can see you face to face. Yes, we can do conference calls. Yes, we can send emails. In my opinion, face to face. There's nothing like it. Standards in Pennsylvania, standards in the country. I have a little story related to technology and the standards that you might appreciate. When the national standards were being written, I happened to be president-elect of NAEA. And the national standards were written pretty much on the phone and by fax. I needed a fax machine. Anyone have a fax machine anymore? The fax machine was in the office next to our bedroom at home. And 3 o'clock in the morning, because now we're talking about the country communicating, 3 o'clock in the morning, my fax machine would go off, right? And it was amazing. We still got the work done. How we did it, I'll never know. Those were the first national standards. I think the last piece that I would like to share with you is the last day that I was president of NAEA. At the national conference, PAEA had a presence. By then, we were turning out presidents one right after another. I believe to this day, we have had the most presidents of any state. Am I right about that? I think I'm right about that. Eldon Catter, our own Marianne Sankwitz. One more artifact. So it's the last day of the conference, the 50th anniversary of the National Art Education Association, and I'm president. And I'm told that I will do a State of the Arts speech. And I get up on the podium, and there are 4,000 people in the audience. But what happened before that, no one ever knew till today. It was 20 minutes after 8, and I was expected to be at the podium at 8:45 for last-minute things, miking, all those things you have to do. And at 20 minutes after 9, I was dressed, and I had my speech in my hand, and I read it one more time, and I hated it. I hated it. It was stupid. Didn't say anything, no solid message, and I took it, and I threw it in the trash. And I wrote another one, like I usually do, a mind map. And I went on to the podium. And I didn't have it on paper, except for the mind map. I hadn't written this one out. I didn't have time. Gave the speech. End of the speech, someone had the bright idea that we'll have a line band. We're in New Orleans, right? We're going to have a line band come down the center of the ballroom, present you with a parasol, right? And then you're going to lead the line band down to the exhibition hall. And that will be our sneaky way of getting out all the participants, all 4,000, down to the exhibition hall. And so I did. And that night, I was the princess on the float. And I threw out beads to all my friends. Before I started to talk this morning, I had a handful of beads. And I gave them to certain people in this room with one criteria. Last week, Bill Eisler, who is our chair at the Arts Education Collaborative, said here in the city of Fred Rogers that Mr. Rogers always believed that friends got him where he was, that it's important to have friends, and firemen are friends, and you are all friends. The people I gave those to have been friends to me for very special reasons. I had about a dozen of them to give out, and I'm not going to have the time to be able to tell you who I gave them to or why I gave them to them, but I can tell you that they have wonderful stories to share with you. And so if you see someone with some glitzy beads on that maybe don't exactly go with the outfit that they're wearing, you might ask them to explain to you how they were my friend. And maybe you'll get a sense of what it takes. What it takes to make a legacy. I'm not so sure about being a legacy, but it's been one heck of a ride. And now, after 50 years, yesterday, a press release went out indicating that I have announced my retirement, and I will retire on February 1st. It's great. Every chapter of my life has been wonderful, and I just can't wait for the next chapter. Thank you for honoring me.
We hope that you enjoy the rest of your breakfast, but if you have had your eye on those centerpieces in the center of your table there, you might be a lucky winner if this is underneath your seat. You get to take it with you.